Come, little children, I'll take thee away. Now that I have you entranced, a volume warning for this Halloween-themed episode. At approximately 15 minutes and 30 seconds, you will hear a blood-curdling scream. Don't worry, audience, all shall be revealed in due time. Welcome to the How Could You podcast. I'm Lauren Tocci.
And I'm Ryan Tocci. But for the rest of this episode, you can call me Ice.
I'm going to call you Ernie the rest of the episode.
Yeah, I'm probably more an Ernie than an Ice. So this is our Halloween episode, everybody, which we're very excited about.
Ooh, spooky.
Now, Lauren, I gotta ask you, when you think Halloween movie, what's the first thing that comes to your mind?
Hocus Pocus.
I was wondering. It was one of two.
Yeah. So here's the thing. Equally, Halloween 1978 to be 100% clear. And Hocus Pocus, they're neck and neck in some ways. But the thing is like, I'm thinking about long-standing love, and also the one I think I'm always most excited to put on, because Halloween 1978 still scares me.
Yeah, as it should.
Yeah, I still find it terrifying. I think I at some point stupidly told you, let's watch it on Trick or Treat night, and I'm totally regretting it because I don't want to watch it now on Trick or Treat night, but to me it's Hocus Pocus. It's the movie we're talking about today.
Yeah, absolutely. And one day, maybe next year, we'll do the 1978 Halloween, but let's have a little fun with this one, because I know how much this one means to you.
Although I'm a little disappointed that you poo-pooed my original idea for this episode, which was the dramatic reading of the entire movie where I play all three witches and you play Thackeray Binks.
I figured you were just going to make me play the bus driver.
Convey you to your most intimate desires.
Do you want to just do it? You're just going to do a one-lady show, aren't you?
I mean, it may take me a few tries, but...
You're going to be like Emma Stone in La La Land and do your own little one-person stage production of Hocus Pocus.
This is my audition. It's happening.
I'm all for that, actually. Let's just stop this now, and let's do that.
Must have been an impact. Yeah, I can quote this movie pretty hardcore. And
all right, folks, let us know, because that might be
It'll be like a special bonus episode if we ever have like a Patreon or something.
Yeah. I love that you think people are going to pay for us to have a bonus episode of you doing a dramatic reading.
I'm shocked they listen for free. I'm going to be honest.
That's fair, actually. That's truly fair.
True investment there. Before we get into this episode, where we're going to break down the iconic 1993, directed by Kenny Ortega, Hocus Pocus, we'll start as we always do. Do you have any Tossie takes for this week?
I do. My Tossie's take is Halloween Kills.
I don't even want to talk about it.
Oh, but are you saying because you don't like it?
No, that's not what I'm saying. Let's hear your take on it first, and then maybe I'll interject.
Getting ready for the show, I had two, but I was like, I've done so many TV shows. For somebody that rips into TV all the time, I'm always giving a recommendation of TV, so I had to do a movie. And it has to be Halloween Kills. It's the movie, right now, it's the number one movie in the country. It's the movie everybody's talking about. It is very maligned, it's very polarizing if people like it. I happen to love it. We've watched it twice. We went and saw it on opening night in the theater, and then we watched it 2 days later on Peacock, so we got both versions, both ways of viewing it. And I loved it even more the second time, once I got a little of the expectation out of the way and was able to just sink into the movie.
Can I ask, and without being spoilery in nature, what do you love so much about this sequel?
I think they're doing a really nice job of blending the three films. Like, they feel truly connected, which is really...
So you mean 78,
2018 and this. I love that they're really, talking about the trauma of these types of events. I mean, listen, it's a horror movie. It's going to be, its own. It's not going to delve into everything so nuanced of these things, and some of the commentary is very heavy-handed, obviously, socially and
evil dies tonight.
Yeah, but I think they're doing a great job with it. You and I both talked about one of the big things is we don't generally get to see this part of a horror movie, right? The second part, the part that comes after. Now, yeah, it's still playing out, but we don't get to see what happens once the kind of chaos has started. And I think they've done a really good job, and I think they did a great job with the characters they brought back. And again, I'm trying not to get too spoilery. I don't know where people are with it. My guess is most people that are huge Halloween film fans have seen it by now. And I will say, that's the biggest takeaway. It's not a perfect movie. And it's not going to be for everybody. You have to be a horror fan, and you probably have to be a Halloween fan. There's no way you don't like 2018, but then like this movie. I just don't. I think that's a hard, I would be shocked to know somebody that likes this one but didn't like 2018. So I think there has to be that bridge there.
No, and I agree with what you said. Like, it's interesting. You said much maligned. And what I've been seeing a lot of is, I think, horror fans will say exactly what you did, that it's not perfect, but there's something that really works about it. Critics are always harsher with horror films. It's a niche genre still, which is crazy to me in terms of like how film commentators speak on it. I think there's been a lot with this that was really forecasted of like, this movie's so brutal, and it like 100% is. It is. I have a hard time saying whether I liked it or didn't, because it's very effective.
Yeah.
It's not a perfect movie by any means. And there are definitely some beats with their commentary that I would have made lighter. Not lighter in tone, lighter in how they handled it.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
Essentially, trust your audience can get there without having to like chant over and over again. But that being said, the opening of it, without being a spoiler, I absolutely adore. And the movie's effective. I was not right the night we saw it. I was so paranoid when we got home. Then for some reason, I agreed to watch it with you again. And we agreed we would watch it in daylight, but we started it too late. So then it was still ending at nighttime. And then I didn't sleep that night.
Pizza guy showed up.
Showed up. I freaked out. The doorbell rang and I'm like, oh, hell no. Like, I am gone. Like, it truly unnerved me. Like, I felt very much that glancing over my shoulder. And this is the thing, and I have always said this, like, Halloween 2 kind of shows that natural, like, what else happens that night.
81, you mean?
81, yeah. But it doesn't do it like this film does it. I mean, this shows the chaos of, like, what a town is going through. But the thing is I will always favor the 78. It is slower. It's not for everyone. I think that movie is a perfect movie. Yes, John Carpenter smoking behind the hedge and all. It is a perfect movie. But this, I don't think you can be a Halloween fan and not feel very satisfied by a lot of what helps. And this movie is scary.
And I'm glad you said that, because, like I said, it was mine, and you're right, it's critics.
Yes.
And you go on, you're going to see people that are talking about it, and it's like, oh, horror, this and that. Anybody that I've talked to that is a Halloween fan, and I'm listening, we're talking 10 to 15 people maybe that I've spoken to, have all loved it. Yeah. So I think that speaks to more. This movie was made for the Halloween fan. It may bring in some other people, but it's not really made for anybody but the Halloween fan. And full disclosure, I will say it, I've talked about it on this, I'm a huge fan of the entire Halloween series other than the Rob Zombie films. I do not like the Rob Zombie films. They're not part of the Halloween series. But, I'll watch part 8 and part 6, producer's cut, and love them. So, I'm already bought in, but to me, this didn't disappoint. There was a lot of things that surprised me I didn't expect. I heard in an interview they talked about making Haddonfield really come alive, and I think they did that. Everybody knows Haddonfield. Like, that is such an iconic town, and I think they really did a great job of bringing that entire town to life and almost its own character throughout. Like, you navigating through the town, you felt like that. It's just... the more and more, and it kind of was like 2018 when I watched it. The first time I watched it, I really enjoyed it, but I wasn't sure everything. I needed to see a second or third viewing, not to know that I liked it, but to understand how much I like it, and that's kind of how this is. Like I said, not perfect, but by far just a really good Halloween movie.
Well said. Truly well said.
So
I just never want to watch it again because it terrified me so much.
And next year, Halloween ends. I cannot wait. So I'm counting the days already to that. But I want to know your Tocci's take.
So it's funny you mentioned this by saying, for a person who trashes TV, you talk about TV a lot. Because actually my recommendation is a TV show. If you have not watched Midnight Mass...
This isn't a TV show.
No, you're right. It's a 10-part movie.
10-part movie. Go ahead.
So we watched last evening a little retrospective interview with Mike Flanagan talking about his career, and he talked about Haunting of Hill House as being something... So Mike Flanagan is the person who directed Oculus and Hush and Dr. Sleep and The Haunting of Hill House, Haunting of Bly Manor. So he talked about The Haunting of Hill House. He wanted to make a 10-part movie. So legitimately, that's what he did now with Midnight Mass too, only it's an 8-part movie. It is tremendous. It is unexpected, but with, I think the thing that was referenced in this video last night that we watched about Mike Flanagan that I feel like is why we attach onto him so deeply. He writes horror with heart. And I think the fact that, and I think this is where he has a lot of nuanced conversations in his films and his television shows. He builds upon his suspense in a way that is incredibly gratifying. I don't think you can watch this and not be satisfied by it. It does have, I mean, it is a horror TV show. It does have legitimately an episode that'll break you down and make you cry your eyes out. And that is saying something with horror because you normally can't get those emotions to switch so seamlessly. But he does it. It's a really interesting and meditative look on faith and community. It's incredible. It is not, and I'm using a pun here, it is not overtly preachy in its messages and themes. It handles them so beautifully. I cannot recommend this TV show enough. And I don't want to say much about it because I don't want to spoil.
Yeah, I mean, I'm totally with you. I mean, at this point, it's anything he writes, directs, we are all in for, and this didn't disappoint. It was, we could not get through it quick enough because it was just how good it was.
And truly, we try not to binge.
Right.
We do, but
Yeah.
Midnight Mass just demanded it. I had to know where it was going.
Yeah, it just, each episode, you just wanted to go to the next one. And I can't wait to just keep rewatching, because I think it's something that's going to give you something every time. We talked a lot about, with Cameron Crowe, about putting his heart on the page, and Flanagan does that with all of his work, which is really saying something because of the type of, filmmaking he does. It's a guy that's been through a lot. He has a lot of emotion, and he does just a really amazing job of making you connect with his characters, because I think a lot of him and his life experience is coming out in most of those.
Well, because when you watch something like Haunting of Hill House, it's a family drama, and yes, there are ghosts. When you watch The Haunting of Bly Manor, it's a conversation on trauma and anxiety and depression and post-traumatic stress disorder. Oh yeah, and there are ghosts too. But and I think that's kind of the thing with Flanagan. I actually think he's a wonderful entry point for someone who wants to get into horror but is a little intimidated. I also, this is a Flanagan household. We are 100% in. And the fact that he announced that his next series is going to be The Fall of the House of Usher, I could not be more excited.
Yeah, I as soon as I saw that, I was like, I sent it to you because I was like, she's going to go crazy for this. Yeah, he just has a way, he had a dialogue in this, because this is heavy dialogue in Midnight Mass. There's long stretches. They're not monologues. They are just genuinely conversations of people talking about things that you would sit there and talk with your spouse or your friend or your therapist about. And there is a moment in the show that I literally had to walk away because it was like, it had gotten so deep inside me that it was like, I'm going to break down just watching this. And I had to take a breath because it was like, he just does such a great job. And it just, like I said, there's so much of what he puts out there that feels like it's speaking directly to you. And, that's just, you can't say enough. And again, it's horror, which, we've talked about this a lot on here. Horror can be very social commentary. It can speak to so many different things that people don't understand about it that aren't fans of it. But this one, I don't even, it's totally about character study with the horror or creepiness to the side.
No, 100%. And I think that's one, yes, you're probably listening to this and going well, that sounds really heavy. Do I want to watch it on my weekend? Yes, you do. I know exactly what point you're talking about. And yeah, there's a way in which he makes things so universal in how he writes his dialogue. I don't know. There's not enough good things to say about it. It's truly, it's a masterpiece. And I think I was worried that people's interaction with Flanagan post Hill House was going to be, if it wasn't like Hill House, then it wasn't Flanagan. And I'm really happy to see that the critical receptions of Bly Manor and of Midnight Mass have been tremendous.
Yeah, the critical receptions, it's almost, I think you get some people that are, again, that bought into Hill House, but then wasn't really sure where they were going with the others. But I agree with you. The critical reception has been over the top.
I'm a big defender of Bly Manor. I love Bly Manor.
Oh, I'm with you. I'm with you. I mean, I think we talked about this before, right? Hill House versus Bly Manor, but it's 1A and 1B.
Yeah, exactly. Well, because I think that there was...
But now it's 1A, 1B, 1C.
Yeah. Well, because I won't lie, I think both of us found a lot of emotional reactions in Midnight Mass. I think I found more emotional reactions in Bly Manor, I think, than maybe you did at times, but like everything he does is fantastic. But with that, I mean, we're here to talk about something much lighter.
That's good.
Which is Hocus Pocus. Which is really a meditation on feminism and the subjugation of women throughout history.
I'm so glad you said that, actually. All seriousness. Because turn of the page I have bookmarked for you, and you will totally...
You're so...
What? Hey, Lauren, it's Halloween time. Everyone's entitled to one good scare. Trick or treat.
I hate you so much. Okay, so we had to stop recording. So let me explain, and there will be a visual on our Instagram page. Follow us at How Could You Podcast that explains this. So we were lucky enough back in 2018, I think, 2017, somewhere in there. We went to San Diego Comic-Con, not to the actual...
Who knows? The last 4 years are all one.
35 years ago. So we went to San Diego Comic-Con, and at that time, The Nun had not come out yet, so they were promoting it in the Gaslamp Quarter. Now, we didn't have tickets to the convention. We were just doing all of the, auxiliary things that you could participate in. And there was this roving group of people dressed as nuns who were handing out what looked like mock prayer cards, if you know what a prayer card is, that had a picture of the nun from the Conjuring series, otherwise known as Valak, on the card. And we got this thing at midnight after hanging out in the Gaslamp Quarter. Yeah. And we were both terrified by it.
But it was what was it, 30 nuns?
Oh,
just no faces.
No faces. Yes. And just handing out these cards. And I think I'm the one who got it. Or did you get it?
No, it was me.
That's right, you got it. Because I was 30 nuns, no thank you. And it was just this really terrifying and hilarious experience. But this card is legitimately, and I will post it on Instagram, is legitimately terrifying. So I don't know exactly how it started, but Ryan started leaving this card for me to find in places because the face on it is so scary. He would hide it in a cabinet. And then it became this game where I would then take it back and then hide it somewhere for him to find. And it's escalated, folks. One time I drove to his work with his spare set of car keys and left it for him to find on his dashboard.
Yeah. We've mailed it to each other a couple of times.
Yes. We've involved coworkers in this scheme. It's just been this thing. So the scream that you heard is because I thought he was showing me something, some enlightened argument he wrote about feminism and Hocus Pocus in his notebook. But no, the card was there. So impressive and so terrifying at the same time.
I'm sure everybody who tuned in to listen to us talk about Hocus Pocus is so happy that...
They're we're 18 minutes deep. Are they going to talk about the movie?
If it's your first time to the show, this is pretty much how it goes. we take 45 minutes till we actually get to the subject at hand. And
if it's your first time hearing us tell this story about the nun card, you should know, Ryan, paybacks are coming. Yeah. Yeah,
that's always the one problem.
Yeah, because once you give it up, last year you put it in my Halloween gift with a Funko Pop of the nun. You're twisted, man. I'm going to put it in a bologna sandwich for you.
What if I eat it?
Oh, that would end the curse. Okay. So let's get to the topic at hand. So if this is your first time tuning in, welcome. We are two people who fell in love at a movie theater and never quite left. And we created this podcast so we could fill gaps in our film knowledge, was the original intention. And then we decided we wanted to just pepper in some different film debates. So obviously it is the spooky season. We were looking for a reason to talk about Hocus Pocus. But I feel like there's something very important with this movie to discuss.
and that is, how could a failed July kids holiday movie become one of the most beloved holiday classics 28 years later?
No, it's a great question, because when you think about this film, I mean, Freeform has essentially built an entire month of programming around how many times they're showing Hocus Pocus.
Oh, you can't go anywhere without it. I mean, yeah, you go into Spirit, there's just the merchandise is everywhere.
Disney has incorporated it into its like Halloween celebrations. Yeah. There's like a Hocus Pocus stage show.
I mean, and we'll get to it. There's a sequel coming out next year, which was basically just beckoned by the fans, to get it. So, but this movie shouldn't be this big of a classic, and I don't even know, it's a cult classic by all sense of the word, but it's bigger than that, right? Because it's
an institution at this point. Yeah, I mean, because it is so beloved, because you just look at, I think, part of it is, and I always say this, like, when a film really hits that zenith is sometimes because the generation that grew up with it has like come to roost, and now they're kind of in control of the programming, and it's like, you've now seen it like continue across multiple generations. But, so this film is released on July 16th.
Right. Why wouldn't you put a Halloween trick-or-treat movie out on July 16th?
And the reason for this was twofold. One, they kind of didn't believe in it.
Right. I mean, that's for sure.
The studio didn't. And then the second part of this was because kids would be off.
Oh, I did not know that.
Yes, it's something I only recently found out. And I thought, like, what an odd thing.
That's saving face. 100%. Is that revisionist history by Disney on that one?
No, this actually comes from Kenny Ortega.
Okay.
Because they had said, well, because kids will be off. And it's probably a line that was sold to them given the fact that they did not have a lot of faith in it. So this movie comes out July 16th. The other film that came out that week was Free Willy.
Oh, okay.
Which is
another
smash success.
Yeah, and it's another a family film. I mean,
and the month of July, so you're talking like your prime summer movie season. So the other films that came out were So I Married an Axe Murderer, The Heads, no, The Firm, Rookie of the Year, Coneheads, don't do the noise.
We come from France.
Poetic Justice, and Robin Hood Men in Tights.
It's an interesting July.
It's a very interesting, well, because what comes out the month prior? Jurassic Park.
Oh, geez, yeah.
Hocus Pocus didn't stand a chance. It only makes a cool $8.1 million, which for box office, that's not great. To give you a contrast to this, a movie that did come out that October, nice Halloween fared movie, The Nightmare Before Christmas, that comes out October of 1993, made $50 million.
Right, and you also have Addams Family too, right? At this, within a couple weeks of that as well.
So, yeah.
So it makes sense also why you didn't overstuff, especially with Disney, why you didn't overstuff October. But it's just still very weird to just drop it in July. It doesn't make any sense to me.
No, it really doesn't. And I think, what does not help this film. So the other films that came out in 1983.
It's funny that you talked about all these movies with 93, because all of them are known, but how many really hold up, right? Like, I mean, Free Willy is this movie of the time, but I don't hear a lot of people talking about showing Free Willy to their kids today.
Well, no, and I do think that this is 100%. Now, granted, people of our generation, like, are probably listening to this and going, what? Like, I love Coneheads. I love Robin Hood Men in Tights. Big how could you for you.
Robin Hood Men in Tights is the one that I might say has had some lasting appeal.
Yeah, I mean, you and I love So I Married an Axe Murderer, but, like, I don't know if anyone else
that movie
really
was bad
loved it. It's bad at the time, but it's, like, funny to quote. But here's the thing, and this is part of it, because you have to talk about, like, so is it the time of year it's released, because people are not in that mode, so it doesn't get that kind of attachment. People aren't going out to see it, given that, like, well, it's October, that would be a fun thing to see. But also another component of this that we have to discuss is potentially the other problem, or maybe the dominant problem, the critical reception of this film. To call it bleak would be an understatement.
Yes.
I pulled some quotes from original reviews. So Roger Ebert said of it, it's like attending a party you weren't invited to, and when you don't know anybody, and they're all in on a joke but won't explain it to you.
Oh, good old Raj.
Which was followed up by, he said, this is a movie just completely riddled with behavior patterns and decibels.
I mean,
it's unkind.
But that's what he did.
No, 100%. But then this is, and just to show you, like, kind of like how much this becomes a theme, USA Today said, it says, if it were one of those households that plunk toothbrushes instead of Snickers into your candy bag, skip it.
I mean, yeah, nobody wants the toothbrush. That's for darn sure.
The New York Times said virtually no grip on its story.
And I had Entertainment Weekly, which was piece of corny slapstick trash. It's acceptable, scary, silly kid fodder that adults will find only mildly insulting. Unless they're Bette Midler fans, in which case it's depressing as hell.
Wow.
So yeah, did not go well with the critics.
No, and listen, and I don't know that necessarily that is a component. I just do think it is an important thing.
It's a big component.
Fair. I do think it's important to kind of think about, because if you're reading this, you might think it's not something to take your kids to, not because of inappropriate content, but because maybe the quality of the product is not there. Additionally, although you and I come July are thinking about Halloween, people are really, kind of ruled by seasons and like a theme, and will go see something that's geared towards the season that they're in.
Yeah, and that's not a 93 thing. We've talked about this. Halloween has expanded over 100%. The years. Halloween was always condensed to a couple of weeks, then to a month, and now over time, 20 some years later, it's drifting into mid-August or maybe even July. So I agree with you there. And also, I think the critic thing is huge because you have now knowing Free Willy was out, you have a family movie. You're going to take your kids. Are you taking them to the Halloween movie? Or are you taking them to the movie that's smash success, getting good reviews? Like, if you're going to choose, you're going with Free Willy. So it makes sense that word of mouth of the critics just crushed it.
Well, and completely, because if you think about this, so think about the person who is a fan of Bette Midler. Well, it's Bette Midler doing a kid's movie. Why am I going to see that?
Right.
Additionally, too, like this film, like some of this did alter. There was actually, and if you watch the original cut of the trailer, you can see scenes that were deleted. This actually was supposed to be more about the Sanderson sisters than the kids. That was something that changed.
That's interesting, and I have something to talk about with that later. You do. So now knowing that's really interesting.
So, and there's that component as well. So, I read one review that kind of, the negative thing that they attributed to it was it's this movie that is shooting an arrow at the tween age, which means you are not really grabbing little kids with this or teenagers with this. You're kind of in no man's land. And I don't disagree, except if you're a person who grew up with this movie, then to you it's like, well, that was just always part of my life. Of course I watched Hocus Pocus over and over again.
Well, yeah, and I think the lasting appeal will be an interesting conversation here on why it is so beloved today or so big today. The one thing I have to say, and I think you're going to jump at me about this, but we're talking about the critics, and I think these are overly harsh for a kid's movie. But it's not, I understand why the critics go after, it's not a critical darling movie. I think I love this movie, and we'll get into where we both came into seeing this, but, it's not a movie, you can understand why Roger Ebert wouldn't like this movie.
Okay, I'll concede this point, because I've otherwise been, digging my nails into the table.
Right.
No, you're not wrong, and here's why. Because the movie wasn't made for Roger Ebert. It wasn't made for anyone who was reviewing this. So there's an element here of quote-unquote not getting it. And also, if you think about pop culture as a whole throughout the 90s, gearing things, yes, there are quote-unquote family movies, but riding that line of the adult humor infused into a kid's film is not as prevalent as we see now. There is the wink and the nods, family movies were family movies and clean content. There's a lot of very sexual humor in Hocus Pocus. I mean, you got a guy making out with a pillow with a sister in the closet. This movie's not clean in terms of content.
Piece of trivia: it is the first Disney film that ever used the word virgin in it.
Oh.
But, one thing actually I have to say,
I'll get it tattooed on my forehead.
Really quick about that, what I appreciate about this movie, as opposed to a lot of 80s, 90s movies that use the quintessential virgin has to, unlock something that happens, and usually it's either good or negative, depending on the circumstance. Yeah. I'm looking at you, Monster Squad. Most of the time in the past, it was used to be the female. And, yes. But it's never said that explicitly. It's inferred that it's got to be a female, which is problematic for a lot of different reasons. This film doesn't do that, which, you know, we don't have to get into too much on a kid's movie about that aspect of it, but I do think that that is something that I applaud the movie for.
Well, it's like the paradigms of virtue, like you have, like, you know, the mother, the whore, the crone, like, right. You know, so, and 100% they would... I do think you see this a lot in 80s and early 90s programming, like, you know, like virginity and how it's discussed. And you're right, and this film does something a little bit different with it in that regards, that it doesn't gender it specifically female. Like, and I do think that's something that's kind of like interesting about this, looking reflectively back at it. But, you know, it's a film that, you're right, the critical reception I do think is actually a pretty negative part of it. It doesn't do well, and sometimes when things don't do well, that naturally kind of leads it towards a conclusion of it doesn't always find that second life right away in the theater. Other movies that came out in 1993, like the top 10, were Jurassic Park, Mrs. Doubtfire, The Fugitive, Schindler's List, The Firm, Indecent Proposal, Cliffhanger,
yes,
Sleepless in Seattle, Philadelphia, and The Pelican Brief. If you're looking at the character of films that came out that year, and, you know, obviously family films you would think would be your highest grossing. You look at 1993 and it's like, okay, so there's the two top are family films.
So
but the rest
Free Willy doesn't make the... I mean, no. I know, I feel like I'm living on the Free Willy thing here, but, like, I'm a little surprised.
You are paying a lot more attention to Free Willy than I ever would have expected.
I just got that Michael Jackson song in my head. You know?
It's now in my head! So. I love the movie Free Willy. My friends and I had a club. It was the Best Friends in Killer Whales Club.
You know what? It's brave of you to put that on this podcast. I appreciate that. And I'm here to get you through this.
In all fairness, we didn't call ourselves that. My dad called us that because we all had big orca posters because of Free Willy.
Oh no, this is making it better. Please keep going.
I just feel very exposed on this episode, if I'm being honest.
You know what? Yes.
You have terrified me. You are now mocking my love of orcas. But you're weirdly talking about Free Willy. Let's move on. Can we talk about Hocus Pocus,
yes.
please, for the love of God?
Thank you for sharing. So this movie, let's talk about the production a little bit, right?
Yeah.
My understanding, David Kirshner writes this. It was a bedtime story for his kids, right? And
yes, which is kind of cool, like that this would be this is how you go night now.
Right. And
don't light the black flame candle, kids.
It was about the cat.
Yes.
Right? Like, that's what the story comes from.
Yes.
He was they seen a cat, and then he ends up telling the story to his daughter or daughters. I apologize, I don't remember that exact, or it might just be his kids in general. And he talks about the cat having a past life as a boy and everything. He ends up writing that story, and this is just the weird, funny thing. He sends it to Muppet Magazine, which, why is that not something... that we can get now. Why don't we have that?
I want a magazine about Muppets.
Right. But that's my understanding. He sends that to, and that's where it gains recognition, and it starts to go from there.
Which is just such a weird thing. It almost sounds like ripped from a different era. It doesn't sound like what you would expect like a film pitch to be in the 90s in that studio system. Like,
you know, you always hear a lot about in that time period, especially with like the National Lampoons and things like that, of like a story that was written to Playboy, and then that story gets turned into some. I love that this one was a story that was written to Muppet Magazine. I just love that.
Well, and what I find interesting about this film, so, like, you know, there's so much, like, love and attention paid to all of this. And even though, yes, it was supposed to be a little bit more based in the Sanderson sisters, that was, like, kind of the original intent that the story was going to focus more on them, because you have Bette Midler, who is massive in the 90s, very bankable star, incredibly talented, incredibly well respected, you know, not only for her acting prowess, but of course an incredible voice. You have Sarah Jessica Parker, who was an incredibly accomplished stage actress and certainly was having a very vibrant career, and you've got Kathy Najimy. So you've got these incredible pieces. It's almost like now you think about, like, how did you get these three massive talents together to be in these roles? And they really craft a lot of the interactions, or I should say particularly like the costume design around the actresses, particularly Bette Midler. Because when they were doing that, so when Mary Vogt was doing like the costume designing for this, she said, she was like, it's Bette Midler. She can't be in something like simple. She can't be in black. She's got to be in a vibrant green. She's got to be larger than life. It's got to be really staged, almost like Shakespearean in like what her presence is. They wanted, you know, Sarah Jessica Parker's outfit was inspired by Sleeping Beauty, That was the costume inspiration for her.
I totally see that, yeah.
And then the role of Mary for Kathy Najimy, they wanted it based around like a traditional, like, you know, kind of like colonial baker's outfit was meant to be like the inspiration for like Kathy Najimy, like with what, like exactly like because of like what like kind of her through line was going to be like the I smell children. Like
it's interesting. I totally like it comes through like completely.
Yeah.
So it's not one of those ones that you get that piece of trivia and you go, what?
Well, I guess like honestly never would have thought of it. But you know,
I don't know if I completely got there on my own, but like you said, knowing it, I totally see it.
And they filmed this, so this was filmed on a mixture of sound stages, and then there were things actually filmed in Salem, Massachusetts and Marblehead, Massachusetts. I do think it's interesting. I feel like the film, for being about Salem and about being witches, I almost have to think, I'm like, do they ignore the fact that the Salem witch trials happened in the movie? Because they never talk about it outside, and I kind of feel like, well, in Salem, there weren't actually witches. There were just people who were hungry for land and high on ergot poisoning and thinking they saw witches. So, like, does this ignore this? Were they, like, supposed to be the only witches that existed in Salem?
I mean, I think, again, we have to remember this is a kid's movie. I don't think they were... I think they essentially took the Salem witch trials and narrowed it down to the Sanderson sisters.
But, like, that they were actually trying to, like, eat babies.
Yes,
like,
yeah.
No, that makes sense.
No, I agree with you. I don't believe that we're supposed to necessarily think that the atrocity that was the Salem witch trials actually happened.
Okay. Because, obviously, interestingly enough, like, certainly the town of Salem now, like, really embraces...
They really embrace... really embrace it.
If you've never been up to Salem, they really embrace, like, kind of the witch component of this, which is weird because there was no actual witchcraft in Salem, like, from a historical perspective, and then additionally, on top of it, like, people were persecuted and died because of those accusations.
But it is the mascot, so...
Of the football team and of the police department.
Yes,
So, there's that for you.
Very cool, like, logos that they have.
Yeah, it's actually, they're very neat. Highly inappropriate and probably offensive, but very neat. But, so they film...
If they sold the football jerseys, I totally would have bought them.
100%. I know you would have. But, like, so they film in Salem, which is cool because you can, as we'll talk about later, you can visit a lot of the locations. But then the rest of it they do on sound stages. The interesting thing about this is because obviously the studio has fears about this. And, we can talk certainly about, like, the critical reception in the box office only seems to unfortunately confirm those fears. But something that I heard Kenny Ortega say in an interview, and I thought this was really important, he said, what I've learned is don't give up. I believed in Hocus Pocus. The girls believed in it. And even though it wasn't found by audiences immediately, the generations have believed in it. And I think... what endures about this movie and why this is so special is it's funny and the humor works. And I think it works at any age at which you see it. I'm going to be very honest. The opening of it used to scare me. I used to honestly think that Hocus Pocus was like a horror movie because that always freaked me out. And I always found... like, Winifred kind of terrifying.
They kill a child within the first 5 minutes of this movie.
So I'm justified in being...
You're very justified.
Can we talk for a second about that opening? It is super. And then her corpse is just there.
Oh, yeah.
Her little Puritan girl corpse is just there. But you gotta love the friend beforehand who's like, she's done for. Dude.
He was just a realist, He didn't want his friend to walk in something. He was like, hey.
He wasn't
she's
wrong.
gone. You're good, man.
But then, like, also, like, that poor family, like, both of your... like, one of your kids is missing and the other one's, like, dead by witchcraft.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
Bad bones day for that family.
So, question here. Okay, so this is my point to just pick at things of the movie and you to explain.
I'm ready to defend
Thackeray Binks, who can talk as a cat, is with his parents.
Yeah.
So, could he talk immediately, or is this something that the cat learned how to do over time?
I'm going to be very honest with you. I've thought about this a lot.
Yeah.
So 2 things. One, I think 100% it's a skill he developed over time.
Okay.
Because he didn't know he had the capacity to.
Fair.
The second thing is, if we think that he had it immediately, here's my justification. He knows his parents are Puritans. Have you read the history books about Puritans? They're not going to take to a talking cat. He's definitely going to get killed by his dad. His dad is definitely going to step on him.
That's not wrong.
He says, get away, foul beast. It's a cat. They're freaked out about cats because cats equal witchcraft.
They're not mummies. What are you...
Dude, Puritans, man.
All right.
Puritans.
All right, and just a question I had. I may have a few of those as we discuss, because I have to ask you. So this is actually important for us to understand where we both are coming from at this film.
Yes.
when is your first time? So you saw this as a kid.
Yeah, I grew up watching this every year.
So you were a fan immediately.
Yes.
That nostalgia has lived through you from day one.
Yes. I'd find it weird if you didn't. Listen, if you were of my age or you were of the age where this film was being targeted, I would find it weird if you didn't grow up loving this movie because, well, so obviously, the second life of this comes in home video release,
Yes.
the Disney Channel playing it voraciously around this time of year,
which is a big thing with Disney a lot. You'll
Yes.
always hear about that. They knew how to market their VHS and home releases.
Because there were kind of four things that to me marked the Halloween season as a child, other than trick-or-treating, of course. And it was the new Treehouse of Horror episode coming on, me getting totally tweaked out by the Ichabod cartoon, which was also on Disney, Hocus Pocus, and the Great Pumpkin, because those are because one of the things we think about is when specials would be on TV, whether it was playing on ABC or Disney or wherever you were watching it from, it felt like an event, oh, it's that time of year, Hocus Pocus is going to be on. And I just grew up loving this movie. I didn't understand most of the humor until I was much older, but I remember honestly thinking that this movie was scary. It's kind of like how I thought Monster Squad was scary when I was a kid.
Yeah, I gotcha.
Actually, Monster Squad and Little Monster.
Oh, Little Monsters with Fred Savage?
That I thought was terrifying too. But I loved them, and that was what we watched this time of year. To me, I always think about, my brother and I watch Monster Squad and Hocus Pocus. And the thing is, you cannot be a child of the 90s and not love the little sister energy in this movie. Because, we had, Phoebe and Monster Squad, Gertie and E.T., and Danny and Hocus Pocus. And if you're a little sibling, you get that vibe.
Yeah, and I think I didn't know you, at that age, but I get the feeling you were exactly Danny.
100%. 100%. And there's only one person who can verify this, and I'm sure he would. I was 100% like her as a kid.
Yeah, I get the feeling that your guys' relationship, and I don't know if the age is probably a little closer for you and your brother, but than it is supposed to be between Danny and Max. I might be wrong about that, but
I don't know how old
but
Max
I feel
is
like that's a
to be
very
close.
dynamic, so
Yeah.
I get that.
Less talking about Yabos and hiding in his closet to scare. Okay, we did probably talk more about Yabos than I wanted to.
Some of the turns this episode has taken.
Honestly, if anyone listens to this, they may not tune in for the next episode.
It's a good run.
Had a good run with this podcast.
Because going back to kind of the question, so see, it was funny that you said this was marketed for tweens, which would have been the age I would have been. I would have been 13, or as my friends would have said, I was going on 17, 18 at that time. But I would have been, 13. I have no recollection. I know this movie existed, but I don't have any idea when I saw it for the first time. The first time I remember really watching it was actually, weirdly enough, we went right about the year before you and I started dating. I went with a bunch of friends from the movie theater we were working at, and we went up to Salem. It was the first time I ever had been to Salem, and the night before we watched Hocus Pocus. It's a movie that I think I have come to love because of you. Not that I had anything against it, but it was just, and that's a big thing I'm going to talk about, I think, with this movie is, I hear a lot of people talk about that they don't like this movie. They don't get why there's such a fandom to it.
Are they broken inside?
Because I think it's a movie that you have one of two things. You either had to see it as a kid and have that nostalgia that sticks with you, or two, have somebody that loves it within your, base.
Because there are very few films that I think I've Bella Lugosi'd-eyed at you, you will love this, and I think Hocus Pocus is definitely one of those.
And I do. I love it. I can't wait to watch it every year with you. I think I come with a little bit sometimes more of the, adult cynical eyes on it, but
everything
in a fun
about
way.
this movie makes sense. I don't know what you're talking about.
But that's what I think is really cool about this movie. It's flawed, quote unquote.
Ew.
But the flaws are endearing. It's some of the fun of it. I don't think it takes away from it. And that's what I think the critics missed with this movie back in 93, right? They watched it with adult eyes and never really got it, that it didn't need to be this completely perfect, great film. It just needed to be a fun holiday movie, and that's what it is, and that's why we're watching it 20
and
years later.
Thing. I will contest that. I will say I do think this movie is filmed well. I think the structure of it makes sense. Yeah, there are some leaps in logic, but also it's witches coming back from the dead because a person lit a candle. That's made from a hangman's fat. So let's take it down a notch about realism. It's not pretending to be. And I think what I feel sorry for the critics missing when it came out in the 90s is, how can you not watch the interactions between the Sanderson sisters and not immediately fall in love with this movie? It's hilarious. Every moment is hilarious. They're such incredible physical comedians. The way they deliver their dialogue is so perfect. You can't imagine anyone else in those roles. And I think there is such an effervescence to how those characters are played. And I also think the kids in this movie, looking at Allison, Danny, Max, and it will even include Thackeray in this, even though he's a cat, I think are just, I don't know, they feel like real kids. I feel like they make real kid decisions.
Completely. I agree with you. Absolutely with that. And also, I'm very excited that I haven't yet said Zachary, which I've been really worried about throughout this entire podcast, instead of Thackeray.
If you think the Tommy thing was bad, I would come at you so hard. So I'll ask this. Now you're someone who, your love of it has grown. Do you have favorite scenes, favorite moments from Hocus Pocus?
My favorite probably scene is the Penny Marshall and Gary Marshall scene. There's a lot of things to love.
They call me master. Wait do you see what I'm going to call you?
And what I love about that scene is it's just so weird. It's so weird. It is so weird. The choices that were made make no sense, yet are just such a joy to watch. Why do you get Penny Marshall and Gary Marshall, who are brother and sister, to play husband and wife? Makes no sense.
It's hilarious.
Why did you put Gary Marshall in that ridiculous costume?
Why did you wear that ridiculous costume 2 years ago for Halloween?
Right. And I remember thinking that night, anybody that doesn't know what I'm being right now thinks I just put together the worst costume of all time. But the interactions that everybody's had, Penny Marshall's hilarious in the scene. How annoyed she is. Because you have Gary Marshall who's playing that so excited. He's so pumped for Halloween.
Because they have a loveless marriage, is what we understand immediately.
They walk in and then the house isn't decorated at all.
And I love the moment too, Mary sitting there with the Cheetos, because I'm big Mary energy. Yeah. I just a Cheeto hanging out of her mouth.
She tries to turn her off with the thing. Or you have when Penny Marshall's coming down the stairs, she's like, I lost 4 pounds.
Master, wilt thou dance with me?
Yeah, and then you have the strange interaction that, the Sarah character who's in love with Satan, she thinks he's...
Ooh, thou shalt not talk to Master in such a manner.
Or it's got one of your favorite lines, which is, he's got a little woman.
Oh my god, that is the best line in the entire movie. Because it's just the way that Bette Midler turns her face and says that's so perfect. Yes. And what I love about her approach to Winnie is that, so she actually found a book of 17th century insults. So that way she could add that to her dialogue so it would feel authentic. So when she calls someone a hollymog or says you maggoty malfeasant or something along those lines, those were 17th century insults that she infused. And I'm I think this is just why I love this movie so much. You're just talking about this one scene, and this scene distills why this movie works so well. It's so weird. That scene should kind of be disturbing, but it's not. It's hilarious because you essentially hear them talking about that they want to go to hell, and that I'm eating the finger of a man called Clark.
Right.
And you have Sarah's in love with Satan, and it's just this great moment because you're wait a second, I think the Sanderson sisters have been in hell this entire time. And so does that mean the devil looks like Gary Marshall?
Right. Yeah.
It's such a delightful scene. I love it so.
Yeah, absolutely. But I mean, trying not to give all of it as your favorite again. What is your favorite scene?
All the scenes are my favorite scenes. One of my favorite scenes, I love the scene when they first go to the Sanderson sisters' house to light the black flame candle. So Max Dennison, and I know you and I have talked about this, he's got big Christian Slater energy all throughout this movie. So if you've ever seen Pump Up the Volume, when he is in the school and they're about to set the witches on fire and he says he's Boris Karloff Jr. Like, he 100% is doing a Christian Slater.
Yeah, let's make sure that we're clear here. He's trying to have big Christian Slater energy.
But what I love...
No offense to, what's his name? Amari Katz, I believe.
Amari Katz, yeah.
No offense to him. I like him in this movie a lot, but...
But I think it's the whole lead up. I love them trick-or-treating around Salem because it just feels so fun. I love when you get to see like the painted green witch pumpkin, because I remember those pumpkins being painted exactly that way. Like when I was a kid, you would go to like the pumpkin patch and they would have the painted ones. And I remember literally a green one with that witch's face. Like, that's such a... But I think there's something about when they get into the house, and I love, like, Allison's, like, kind of coy about things, but you can see she gets scared, and Danny, who's been, like, very adventurous, but, like, kind of wise about things. Yeah. And I love when the Sanderson sisters come back, and she's like, I've waited ages for those sisters. Like, and she goes into this, like, whole, put-upon accent, and you're like, oh my god, Danny is so smart. Like, but it's just... I can't, even when I say that, I'm like, no, but I love this scene. No, but I love this scene. I think that's the thing. There's just so much of this movie that to me works. Like earlier in the episode, we quoted the busboy line. And I love the humor of them being on the bus. And I love when the Sanderson sisters are like confused by modern conveniences. Like, they think like the road is a black river. And then Sarah Dawn's going, firm as stone. Like, there's just 1,000 moments.
Okay, question about all of that.
Oh, jeez, here we go.
Because they do have all of that, right? Where they're confused by a lot of modern day things. But then sprinkled throughout, there are things that don't... Like, when they fly up to Max and they're like, pull over and let me see your permit. Well, I mean...
So,
I'm overthinking the kids' movie, aren't
I? 100%. Here's the thing. They 100% pull a man from the grave... who's a zombie to fight the children's...
Who's got full skin? That was another question I have to ask.
Yeah, who has not decomposed.
In 300 years.
But has moths living inside of his mouth.
Right.
Which, by the way, were actually real moths inside of his mouth. He had a moth bag in his mouth and then would have to open his mouth for the moths to fly out, which is just... I mean, good on you, Dougie Jones.
Doug Jones, man. We gotta talk about our favorite Doug Jones. I mean, anybody that does... I mean, Guillermo del Toro staple.
Yes.
He's essentially does everything that's, from...
The Shape of Water,
Pan's Labyrinth, Hellboy. Yeah. I mean, he is so good at all of what he does, and I loved when I found out a few years ago that it was Doug Jones that played, Billy Butcherson.
He just doesn't play the headless version.
Oh, okay, interesting. All right, gotcha.
Yeah, I don't know why that is in particular, but he doesn't play the headless version.
Because I think he has a head. Right? In real life, I think.
Yeah, thank you. But you had the question about the permit. Right. Pull over. Show me a license. Like, no, and listen, there are things like that, like kind of like anachronistic like moments. But I think that's the whole thing. It's supposed to be, as they say earlier, it's a movie of frolic. Like, you are supposed to have a lot of fun with this. And I think, like, you're asking about favorite scene, and like, so I, obviously I located to like when they like light the black flame candle, because that's like the inciting incident. But I think the thing about this movie is it's charming throughout, whether it's Billy Butcherson and kind of the physical comedy of that, or the ways in which like Sarah is like such a space cadet, like is like laughing in the opening when they're about to be hanged, and like at every moment where they should feel like she has like no interest in actually being productive, except that she has like a beautiful singing voice and can like lure children to their death. But like, other than that, like,
song that was written by the same guy that wrote the Titanic song, James Horner.
So just occupied so much of my childhood.
Right. Yeah.
Like, I want to say to 1993, Lauren, 4 years later, that man's going to pen another song that's going to really break you down when you listen to it.
Your heart does go on.
Thank you, love.
Your heart does go
on. Oh, my God. Back to Hocus Pocus. But I think that's, like, it's all the little... It's, the amok. Like, it's 100%. There's just so many, like, fun performance moments where... I think, and it's not necessarily that there's a lot of talk about this film being improvised. I think it just knew how to play its humor well. I read a criticism of it that said, like, the tone is uneven. And I'm like, the tone is so even.
Yeah, I don't I agree with, or disagree with that completely.
The only thing that's different is, as you pointed out, well, they kind of kill a little Puritan girl at the beginning, and that's a little weird. But other than that, it's pretty much the same tone the entire movie. Because even when, like, the I put a spell on you happens. By the way, as a child, had no idea that she had put a spell on them to dance all night. I just thought they came out of there, like, drunk. That's, like, what I thought it was.
I love that you as a child didn't think that they got a spell put on them. You just assumed the parents were partying all night.
I just thought they were, like, really intensely into it. And then it was, like, at some point in watching this, I'm like, oh,
you mean
they died.
I put a spell on you, which somehow the witches from 1693 knew all the words to.
Okay. They also had Lycra leggings. In 1693, Lycra was not invented in the 17th century, so
I'm playing with you. I'm just having fun.
Also, how does she get purple streaks in her hair? There's so many questions.
Also, I didn't know it until the most recently. Why does Sarah's hair change? Sarah's hair goes from straight to curly on and off throughout the entire movie.
You've seen my hair with humidity. You know that happens.
That's fair. But does it go back?
It can.
All right.
In the right conditions, I guess. But yeah, there's just so many moments in this movie that I love, so many scenes that are, like, fantastic. And
so why do you think, though, then I mean, I know you love it. Take your fandom for a second out of it.
I'll try.
But we talked about this. I mean, this is a movie that today you can go in any Halloween store. It's huge. It's, all throughout the holiday, you're seeing it play in the theaters, and there's costume parties, and, amazing drag shows that are now really, embracing this. Why does this movie endure?
And it's a great question, and it's something that I'm gonna hope to talk about in a way where it's not just about my love, because, like, even when you asked me what my favorite scene was, I sputtered. I know I wasn't coherent in expressing my favorite scenes because I really truly love this movie totally. I think the thing that makes this film endure is it's clever, it's rewatchable, and it's quotable, and it allows itself to have immediately, like, great sound bites. It has a gif ability, like the, oh look, another glorious morning makes me sick. Like, It has, like, really cool snapshot moments that, like, completely portray the personalities of the characters. And I think that that's something really easy to attach onto. Like, it has, it's an easy entry point for something that's a little bit spooky, but it's not, like, wholly scary. The humor still works. It's also a movie that I think does not show its age because there's nothing really with technology in it other than a few minor things that would otherwise situate it as, oh, that's so 90s.
I'm just really glad you said that. Like, I don't mean to speak over you.
No.
I'm agreeing with everything you're saying, but that part I cannot say enough. Like, that's a huge thing. This is why Halloween Town, no offense to it, I know it's got its people that love it, it doesn't visually hold up. Yeah. There are just things about it that don't, and if you love that movie, nothing against it, it just doesn't have the same, where this movie, I agree with you, it looks timeless. All these characters, again, we talk about this a lot with these types of movies, that we still love today. It's these characters that you're still connecting with, and then, obviously, like you said, there's nothing that really shows the time period is. We know what the time period is, and probably Ice and Ernie and his friend, who I can't think of the name, Jay, they're probably feel like the most mid-90s characters thrown in there.
Well, I mean, it calls them, like, check out the new cross trainers.
Yeah.
Like stuff like that. But I think the thing, like, because Halloween Town's score and cinematography are what date it the most.
Yeah.
Whereas this, I think, looks very fresh, and that's a credit to Kenny Ortega and how he shot it. I do think that because a lot of it was shot on location, I mean, not a lot of it, but the 2 weeks that they spent in Salem, they made good use of their time. So I think the real locations also helped to cement it a little bit more firmly. The one thing is, I mean, you see them dancing in front of, like, the fountain from Friends. Like, that's when they were on the WB lot and shooting on set,
I love that. Did you know that the house that when they're walking up and Thackeray and Max are talking when Danny and Thing are dancing around the fountain, they're in front of the house from American Beauty. So,
oh my god!
If anybody knows, Stora Birch lived in the house right behind Max.
Oh, that's so funny. I didn't know that.
I just love when those, kind of connections happen.
Oh, for sure. And I think it's like, there's a musical number. It's got light horror. It's humorous. The jokes don't feel dated. It doesn't have anything necessarily super offensive in terms of the time period, like, where you have to think, like, oh, well, that didn't age well. And I also think you have at this three really accomplished actresses who could carry the movie and carry them with very different personalities and energies, but could have these very iconic performances. So I think in that, and also like, and the kid actors in this too are tremendous. So like, I think you just have those things going in the right direction. So when something is rewatchable and quotable and feels kind of timeless, like it just makes it something that people can keep coming back to.
Yeah, well said. I agree with you. It's a pure, I think that's the thing. It's a pure movie. Like, it's just, it feels pure and good. And I think that it's pure Halloween, which I think helps. You know, they talk about that a lot with the movie Halloween. We just recently watched something where, does that movie, if it's not taking place on Halloween, does it still hold up? Like, does it still get replayed every year by people? By basing it around a holiday gives it rewatchability. So I think, obviously, this movie is so ingrained in the Halloween spirit. But like you said, but it's for family. Like, you don't have to be about the scary, quote unquote, which I think is cool.
And I also think, like, you know, you have like a cute, adorable animal at the center of it. That's always great.
Yes.
Who doesn't love Thackeray Binks?
Thackeray Binks, who, did you know, was voiced by Nelson from Full House.
Shut the hell up. No, he wasn't.
DJ's rich boyfriend. Yes, I was completely floored by that. James Martson's his name.
I knew it wasn't the same actor.
A very big
know.
TGIF guy, right? Because he was on Step by Step and Boy Meets World, but most notably was Full House.
That is so wild that he voiced that. Another thing that so occupied my childhood.
That great voice. Because I think he even dubs over, because he's not who plays Thackeray in Salem in 63 or 93, 1693. So he's not him, but I think his voice dubs over him, if I'm not mistaken. But
no, you are right about that, because I did know it was a different voice. I just had no idea whose voice it was.
Yeah, the gentleman that played him actually is on NCIS now, so who played him as, you know,
like in
the
his
boy
human form.
version, in its human form. That's the other thing I think about this movie.
Well, I had to wait for a virgin to light a candle.
That I think really holds up is it's the right amount of edge for kids.
Yeah.
That keeps kind of giving as adults, right? Like, so you as things that you may have missed are still giving today, which I think really kind of helps this one endure. And we talked about Salem, I think is huge. Because it's a beautiful color palette to this entire movie. Truthfully. They do
it's a vibe.
Yeah. Yeah, they just do an amazing job with it. You capture that fall, you know, New England feel to it. You give it a bit of clout and reality by actually filming in Salem, which is all really, again, really holds up. And you can go see the Max and Danny's house.
So you can see Allison's house. Mm-hmm. You can see Max and Danny's house. You can also see the Pioneer Village, which was the setting for Salem in the opening. Just please be warned that a very cranky grad student will get mad at you if you look over the fence at it.
True story. True story. So I like to think that grad school student graduated by now.
Not with that attitude.
I heard that this year they were going to, Allison's house, they're actually going to decorate at some point to look identical to the movie, which is really cool.
And, you know, and Salem is a really fun town. It's got obviously a complicated history, but it also has become like a destination spot for people who love Halloween and for people who love Hocus Pocus, because everything's been made so accessible. The people who own Max and Danny's house are very welcoming in terms of not trying to dissuade people from coming and taking pictures at the house, which I think is really
and you
kind.
can get to that without disrupting their home.
Exactly,
which I think is very important to know.
It's in a gorgeous spot. It's right on the waterfront.
We're talking about that. Max's room was amazing.
Room goals in the 90s.
Absolutely. Max, settle down with your little bit of your crankiness, man.
Oh my gosh, yeah. Just like when he was like playing his drums so aggressively because it made me move from LA, like, you know, Los Angeles. He has the dopest room in the house. I mean, until obviously they blow up the top of the house, which is not great.
Do you think that gets addressed at some point? Do you think? Oh, but speaking of that, though, do you think that one Mr. Leonardo DiCaprio would have played that character with as much, would you say, emo-ness.
Okay, so here's the thing. One, because, all right, I think the actor who played Max Dennison is very, like, 90s.
Katz, who went on to do Erie, Indiana.
Yeah, like, very 90s kind of heartthrobby, but, like, a little bit more boyish and a little bit dorkier. I don't know how you think Leonardo DiCaprio's not bagging Allison. Like, right? No one's saying fat chance, Leo.
Yeah, so Leonardo DiCaprio was legit offered this. This is actually from him that he talked about it. He said that he had been offered more money than he ever dreamed of to be in Hocus Pocus, but turned it down to be in What's Eating Gilbert Grape.
And, this is a fun what if, because you think about, does it change the tone of the movie? Is Max played differently? And I'm not even saying negatively, but just differently. Because Max has a big, like, energy of, like, bravado. And again, it's like that, I can't describe it as anything else. And maybe it's because it's the 90s, like, Christian Slater vibe, like... I don't know if Leo does it the same. I don't know if I want to see it because, Leo's in so many things that I love. And the trajectory of his career because of doing...
Gilbert Grape, which he gets an Oscar nod for, and he is amazing. Listen, I know that we are getting away from those types of portrayals in films, and rightfully so.
Yeah, because neurodivergency is something that should be casted by neurodivergent.
Yeah, but I will say that I believe that he was excellent in it for its time, and which catapulted his career or put him on the map. At that point, he had been Critters and Growing Pains. So, like... I think Leonardo DiCaprio is such a good actor that his career would have went no matter what, even if he had been in this. And I think this kind of goes back to our conversation last week with Brad Pitt being in Almost Famous. What I think, though, is it would have taken away from these movies years later when we rewatch them. Because then they look like Bette Midler, I get it. But Bette Midler is the show. Like, she was made for this type of role. She's a Broadway actress. Like, she is energy.
She slams, I put a spell on you.
But, the Revenant, Leonardo DiCaprio, and watching him, it's like watching Growing Pains now. Like, you can't see the character of Luke without thinking, like, this is one of our all-time greatest actors, like, in this very strange, goofy role. And I think that's how we would look at this. So I think it would detract from the movie today, not in a bad way. I think Leo would have been awesome in it, but
it's a fun what if. I'm sure it would have been really fun. But Omri Katz does such a great job playing Max, and that kind of like he's very sweet. I love the relationship between Max and Danny. I think it's played very sweet. I think there's like such like a good kinship there, and then additionally like he's protective, but he gets aggravated. It's hard being the big brother. Like I just feel like he does it so well. And you're saying about Bette Midler obviously being perfectionist. I have to ask.
Yeah.
The time-honored question when thinking about Hocus Pocus. Are you a Mary, a Winnie, or a Sarah?
Fair question. All right.
It's the most important question I'm ever going to ask you.
That is true. I feel a lot of pressure. I have to go easily with a Mary. I am Mary.
You're such a Mary.
Yeah. Listen, I am not a leader. I am not the Winifred here. Like, I always have to joke that I am a Robin, not a Batman. Yeah. And this is where I am a Mary, not a Winifred. I do not have the frantic, I know this sounds crazy, I don't have the frantic kind of energy that Sarah does. Like, I don't have that, which we know where the next question's going to go and what your answer's going to be here. But yeah, I am more Mary. I am there to just kind of help out the situation. So, who are you, Lauren?
Well, I have to say, though, because you 100% would be like, let's form a calming circle.
Yeah.
Sir, don't think that's being honest with thyself. Like, you are 100% a Mary. Okay, so I think I'm a Sarah because I'm a space cadet.
In all the best ways.
Thank you. I just kind of dance about. I'm in my own world. I would be 100% saying hi to the nice zombie man and not really worrying about like the situation at hand, just in her own world, but I do think I have Winifred's anger. I am calm! Like, I do think I am mostly Sarah with a touch of Winnie if you cross.
That's fair. I like when you said that about Sarah because I think that fits, right? Like, Sarah, and probably even Mary a little bit more Sarah, I don't think Sarah's is bad. Like, I think she's just kind of like, I'm there, I'm just doing my thing, right?
Dead man man's toe, dead man's toe,
She's a
and
free
dead
spirit.
man's toe.
Like, she likes everybody she meets, right? She's not really evil, which is you. You're not evil.
Oh, thank
You're
you.
just a fun-loving, just enjoy the moment.
Yeah, I only suck the lives out of children because my sister told me to. I don't want to disappoint her.
We're learning more and more about you every day.
Okay, so we do know that a sequel is coming out. It's actually filming right now, which is super exciting.
Right. I gotta say, we're killing our reboot sequels here with these movie picks because half these movies already have sequels in the works.
Well, yeah, it's kind of...
Or they've been rebooted or something.
Yeah, there's some version of, a second leg for it. So, with the sequel coming out, we do know that Bette Midler and Sarah Jessica Parker and Kathy Najimy have all returned and are reprising their roles. It is filming in New England right now, so if anyone wants to road trip, hit me up. And so obviously we're going to go back to Salem. There is a sequel book. The sequel book focuses on Allison and Max's daughter, which is kind of fun, and they're all a part of it. And and I believe Danny has a daughter too, and essentially the kids all know that it actually happened. But they know it's their family secret that they don't talk about with other people, which is an interesting turn. So I'll ask that. Now that's the book. I don't think any indication has been given that they're following the storyline of the book that was written. But I'll ask you, do you have any hopes for the sequel? Things that you hope would happen?
Yeah, don't half-ass it.
Sure.
I hate to use the word about talking about a kid's movie, but honestly, they need to go all in. And a big thing that I think has to be said is don't play to the audience. And what I mean is you have so many fans that are going to want, they're excited about this. And what movies feel this need to do in sequels like this we have to hit all the hits of the jokes and we have to figure out a way to force them back in to say, we don't need Sarah to do a muck again. She did it great in the first movie. We don't need to force another time for her to say it. Something like that.
Let it be original, just how they organically would act.
Remember what worked about this movie. The movie is, at its heart, it's a movie about family, growing up and about being a kid and the magic of that. That's what's endearing about it. It's all about the kids. So, don't be the Bette Midler show and go for the subtle humor. Don't make jokes. That's what worked.
Well, because I think that's the thing is what works about the original is it's quirky and it's funny in unexpected ways. And it's funny almost in that once you see it later, you realize oh wow, that's kind of cheeky what was just said there. I completely agree with you. I think the thing I would like to see is something that again is very humorous that is a coming of age story as well. I don't actually think my hopes are very dissimilar from yours. Some callbacks are fun. I know there's going to be a musical number. There's no way that you don't.
Fair, and I'm okay with
Broadway
that.
trained actresses, of course, you're going to do that. You're obviously, I don't need it to make a lot of big leaps in logic for me. I'm just going to accept it as is, whatever they explain the reason. I do think some callbacks will be fun if placed well.
Yes.
And I did actually see an article today that the prevailing rumor is that all original cast members are now signed on.
Thora Birch is there. I'm getting my ticket.
Oh, of course. Thora Birch is an icon. So those are kind of my hopes. I'm here for it. I'm excited. I'm just going to go in excited because 1993 Lauren had no expectations with the movie, and I'm going to make 2022 Lauren act the same.
Yeah. I mean, are you okay that it's going to be Disney Plus and not in the theaters, or do you wish that it was in the theaters?
That's fine. I listen, obviously we're big advocates of the theater experience, but I'm also settling into the fact that, that relationship is changing. And I think there's a way of looking at it in terms of democratization of how films are available, that we can look at it with some hopefulness and for it not to be an overtly negative thing, just as long as the theaters stay too.
Yeah, you speaking to my heart.
So do us a favor, turn on Freeform this weekend, and you'll probably find Hocus Pocus. Turn on Disney Plus, and you'll definitely find Hocus Pocus. But just rewatch Hocus Pocus this weekend because it's such a great movie. And
stay tuned for Lauren's dramatic retelling of it, rereading.
I'm telling you, if you twist my arm enough, fans, I'll do it. If you're not currently following us on social media, please follow us at How Could You Podcast on Instagram, at How Could You Pod on Twitter. You can always email suggestions at howcouldyoupodcast@gmail.com. We love hearing from you. Stay tuned for our cocktail of the week and exciting updates about our upcoming episodes.
And hey, on Trick or Treat night, if Jimi Hendrix shows up, call us. Until next time, enjoy the Odyssey, and happy Halloween from the How Could You podcast.